Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Take, my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Elijah was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins.
Oh, the recorder isn't showing up. Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Huh. I got Stunde der Wahrheit and nothing else. Maybe you could restart it.
Restart what?
The screen sharing, it doesn't seem to be working.
Uh-huh. Okay. So?
Wow, nothing today. I'm not getting any screen share today. Why is that?
I don't know.
Just strange.
I have it on like all the other days. Recorder is already running for a minute now.
Boy, what's wrong with my computer? Oh, there it is. It finally showed up. Okay, great.
Oh,
all right, Jörg, I'm all set. I don't know what happened there. I've never seen that glitch before.
Okay.
All right, I'll do a little intro.
Yeah, please.
Hello, YouTube. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bret Norman Broadcasting Network today on this beautiful Sunday, June 2nd, 2019. And we are gathered here on Skype all the way across the Atlantic from Belgium to Minnesota. Yes, in the central portion of the United States to the central portion of the European Union. Isn't that something, Jörg?
Well, central portion, I don't know. I'm quite in the west in Belgium here.
In the west, but you are the central hub of the European Union.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I'm the Jesuit High in Belgium. In
Yes.
Europe. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, yes. And we have quite a Jesuit High, too, but it's not very well known in the United States. Kind of, flown under the radar?
Yeah, that will be my subject tonight in the German reading of Rulers of Evil. We are going into the Carroll family and how the three Carrolls, Daniel, Charles, and John, flew under the radar, not being identified as quote-unquote founding fathers of the United States of America. Yeah.
This sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it's an interesting article that I took out of a booklet, The Jesuit Vatican Global Conspiracy, that Walt Stickle put together some years ago, based on the book from Ronald N. Cook, and put together with a few other books, and these are excerpts then from a website on the Founding Fathers. I can show you if you want to. I have the PDF right here.
Sure, why not?
And
you bet.
Here, for example, you have the website, you see, CatholicEducation.org, Culture, History, Catholic Founding Fathers, the Carroll Family, HTML. When you go to their website, you will find this little article that is here, of course, translated into German, and that is from a family member of the Carroll Calvert family. This article is from Charles Carroll Carter. That's the Carroll Calvert family, or Carter family as it's called today, and he writes a little article here that is translated here into German, and it ends with a little sentence, even though they did pay huge contributions to the American Foundation, the three Carrolls somewhere fell under the radar as acknowledged founding fathers. Maybe that is because they were Catholics, 1% in a country and a culture that many years was overwhelming 99% Protestant. So, and this is what I'm going to read tonight in Rulers of Evil in the German version. This is a 10 pages paper, and it continues to read parts of the book The Grand Design Exposed by John Daniel, who you probably also know. And yeah, that's about that. But today we are gathered here to read a little bit in this book that is still called The Divine Program of the World's History. We are going to continue therein just for a few minutes, you and me alone, and then our brother Michael from Germany will join us in the call. He couldn't make it on time, so we start already, and then he will join us during our reading. And I'm looking forward actually to do the next reading. How about you?
Yes, absolutely right, brother.
It was very interesting. It was very interesting what we read yesterday about, all this.
Sure is.
This stuff
on
the Book of Revelation. So we ended somewhere here on the page 123 in the book, or 105 in the PDF, because we were reading about the analysis of, Turkey became bankrupt and the Ottoman Empire disintegrated. Verses 13 through 21, the author says, because we already read through verses 1 through 15, or 1 through 13, and we understood, and 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, we read all that here, and we understood by reading the Bible what, how am I going to put it? This is the Bible here, this is the King James Bible, this is Revelation chapter 16, and we understood that the first part of this Revelation chapter dealt with the part before the 19th century, and the leaning onto, and now we are going into the last few verses, where he speaks here, as you can see in verse 16, he says, the Battle of Armageddon, mentioned in verse 16, is thought by many expositors to refer to an era of great wars rather than to a single great battle. See 1915
Wow.
1937 AD. So we have to understand.
My.
Yeah?
Isn't that something, Jörg? And this was written in 1916?
Yeah,
or put together. Yeah.
And probably, I don't know why he writes CSC 1915, re-era 1915,
Okay,
1937.
sure.
I don't
Maybe
know
it
how he
was,
comes to these dates. Anyway, the point is that he says the Battle of Armageddon mentioned in verse 16 is thought by many expositors to refer to an era of great wars rather than to a single great battle. Now, an era of great wars, Brett, this is exactly what started with the First World War. And as I said yesterday already, as you probably remember, at the end of the First World War in 1919, we had Marshal Foch, who was the head of the Allied soldiers in the end of the World War. Let me just put a picture of him up here, because there are probably many people who don't know him. Here's Marshal Foch. His brother was a high Jesuit. He himself was Jesuit trained. And he was the marshal. That means he had the highest ranking among the soldiers of the First World War. And he made a quote that you can still find today. I think even in Wikipedia it is to be found. You know, Wikipedia you always have to take with a grain of salt. You know that, but
that's right.
Even in Wikipedia that quote is to be found. That he said, what we sign here, speaking of the quote-unquote peace treaty of Versailles after the First World War, that ended on 9/11/1918, by the way, 9/11 spelled in the European way, the 9th of November, you would call it 11/9, yeah.
Sure.
So in
Interesting.
1919, yeah, of course, 1919, when these negotiations were, this Marshal Foch said, what we are signing here is not a peace treaty, but a 20-year truce. And so exactly 20 years later, in September, if I'm not mistaken, September 1939, the Second World War broke out. Okay? And when you study your papers diligently, and I mean the papers, even the papers that you get in the official historic accounts, mean Wikipedia and all that stuff, you understand that the Second World War never ended, because there's not a peace treaty made after the Second World War. There just is not. And that has a lot to do with the fact that Germany didn't surrender. It was the army, it was the armed forces who completely surrendered. But Germany, that state, could not act anymore. Yeah? And that state, that nation state of Germany, could not surrender because it did not exist at the time the war, quote-unquote, ended. And the political conglomerate they put about it, then later, which is called the Federal Republic of Germany on the one hand, and the German Democratic Republic on the other hand, that was united in 1990 into the Federal Republic of Germany as you know it today, is not a successor of the Third Reich. Even the German Supreme Court said so, that the Federal Republic of Germany is not a successor of the Third Reich. So the German Reich, in the bounds of, means in the borders of 1937, is still existent today. But it cannot act because it doesn't have a body anymore. Everything is taken away. It is amputated. And therefore it cannot even be signed a peace treaty. So, when we take this into mind, what I just told you, and then we read about what Albert Close says here, speaking of that by many expositors, verse 16 of Revelation 16, is to be understood as an era of great wars rather than to a single great battle, what is the time that we live in? Because after World War II ceased, let's say, the great battle that was against Germany, let's just focus on that, and then at the end of August of the same year, the battle ceased for Japan with the dropping, quote-unquote, dropping of 2 quote-unquote atomic bombs. I'm not going into the details there, but let's leave that up for people who have done better research than us. Well, we know that probably these atomic bombs do not exist, it's especially not in the way they tell us.
Right.
When those battles of the war ceased, the war took another shape. And right after the quote-unquote ending of the Second World War, you have the starting of the Korean War. From that came the Vietnam War, and from that came all the other wars. For example, in 1975, the Vietnam War ended, and in 1978, if I'm not mistaken, or 1979 was it, Russia fell into Afghanistan. And isn't there a quote from Zbigniew Brzezinski saying we are giving the Russians their Vietnam in Afghanistan or something like that? So you have that war over there that is still cooking until today, until 2019, because there are still troops in that country, American troops, of course, to protect the poppy crops and all that stuff. But since 1945, we have had so many wars that, in my understanding, this is exactly what Albert Close probably means when he speaks of not one big battle, but as an era of great wars. That's what I understand from it, especially from the standpoint of 1916. So first you have the 20-year truce, because in the time between 1919 and 1939 there were not great wars, but there always were wars. In 1937, for example, a war many people in the United States of America probably never even heard about, was the Abyssinian War, where fascist Italy fell into the northern part of Africa, into countries, those are today called Eritrea and Ethiopia, and killed thousands and thousands of people, many even with poisoned gas, like in the First World War. You had in 1936 the Spanish Civil War that was supported by German troops, the Legion Condor, this flying legion that supported Franco, who was the fascist leader, or the Nazi leader of Spain in that time, was supported by Hitler and was supported by Mussolini with troops, with material, with everything else, with money, and so on and so on. So that was that war, 1936, that war, 1937. Then you had 1939, the outbreak of the Second World War, the ceasing of the fighting in 1945, and then continuing in all other little wars ever since, all over the world, even until today. Maybe, Bret, and that's the conclusion that we should get out of this, maybe we are right in the middle of Armageddon today. Yeah?
Yeah, that's something we should consider. Mm-hmm.
It says in the Bible, and he gathered them together into one place, called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. And the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air. And there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, It is done. And there were voices, and thunders, and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were on the earth, so mighty an earthquake, and so great. Now, we still have to understand the Bible as a spiritual book, all right? So, what does an earthquake then resemble? We are not speaking about an earthquake, a physical earthquake here somewhere on the earth. We are speaking of the shaking of nations and the shaking of governments. That's what an earthquake does, right? It shakes the earth, it shakes nations, it shakes countries. Well, a spiritual earthquake shakes nations, shakes governments. And what have we seen since 2001? The American government, the American soldiers are overthrowing one government after another. Starting in North Africa, Libya, with Gaddafi. You have Egypt, you have Ukraine, you have all these revolutions, these, what do they call that, spring revolutions and color revolutions and all that stuff. All that popping up, all those being wars. I mean, the war of Ukraine, nobody talks about today anymore, but that war is still going on. You have the war in Syria that is still going on against Assad and all these guys. And Assad, right, by the way, is a Jesuit puppet, because Assad is a papal knight. It's all a theater. It's all, but the Bible tells us clearly, it says, And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake. And what an earthquake is the shaking of nations. So the one nation after the other falling, and many even then signing a concordat with the Roman Catholic Church, means they all fall back under the wings of Rome. And then it says here, and the great city was divided into 3 parts. So we are speaking probably about Rome, Babylon, the great city. And the cities of the nations fell, where I just explained to you that. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And understand me correctly, we are not saying that all these things have happened yet, but we are saying that we are in the middle of this happening and in the development of it going to be happen. Now, the author says here, Elliot, E.B. Elliot interprets verse 19, and this is what we just read here, verse 19. E.B. Elliot interprets verse 19 as a possible prediction of the dividing of Papal Europe into 3 parts, instead of 10, as at present, by the coming Armageddon conflict. And what did I say yesterday about Europe falling into 3 different parts? We have the Brexit, the British exit from the EU. That's one part Europe falls into. You have the remaining European Union. That is the second part. And at the third part you have Russia, which is not part of Europe, but until Moscow, or even a little bit further unto Moscow, Russia is part of Europe. It's not on the Asian continent, but is on the European continent. And when Russia, or the Soviet Union, fell in 1991 into all the different parts it is still today, that is a part of the falling away. Now you have the Brexit falling away in 2019, and this will put Papal Europe into 3 parts, wouldn't it? I mean, this is just a suggestion of mine. I don't know, but this is a way that how you can interpret that. Yeah. By the way, is Michael joining us in the meantime, or has he still not arrived?
I think he is.
I don't know.
Listening.
I don't see Skype. You see Skype, so.
Yes.
I'm still listening.
Oh, okay. You're still listening. Okay, Michael, first and for all, welcome to the broadcast today. I don't know how much you have heard and how much you have listened to the ongoing broadcast. The 2 we sent yesterday, I sent to you. I don't know if you had the time. But we are really digging into a quote-unquote Bible study a little bit here to analyze Revelation chapter 16. And we are trying to understand what the author, Albert Close, puts in this book, and of course what Jesus Christ put in his book in Revelation chapter 16, 2,000 years ago. And we're trying to make ends meet and to understand what this is all about. So whenever you have a question or a comment on what I am saying, then please interrupt me. I didn't know that you were there. That's why I'm saying this to you. Okay? But welcome.
Yeah, no problem.
But welcome to the broadcast in the first place, brother.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad that I can join you both today. I'm just 10 minutes late, so I had not so much loss, and I also have listened to your 2 last broadcast of yesterday, so I'm right in the middle.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so.
Great.
Wonderful. So let's go on with the understanding. So Elliot interprets verse 19 that we just read as a possible prediction for the dividing of Papal Europe into 3 parts instead of 10 as at present by the coming Armageddon conflict. Possibly the fall of the cities of the nations, also prefigured in verse 19, may refer to some future overthrow of all law and order in all the cities of Europe by anarchist, socialist, and revolutionary mobs. I think that yesterday I made the comment that I told you that we have, even in German, a few authors like Udo Ulfkotte, who wrote a book like The Civil War in German Cities. That guy deceased already a year or 2 ago now. Daryl Eberhard would use his famous verse, premature death or something, as he said. I mean, people taking out of the prime of their lives all of a sudden, being suicided or whatever. That probably goes for Udo Ulfkotte also. He wrote a book about this, the war in our cities, or the civil war in our cities. I haven't read that book. I don't need to read that book. I know the agenda, and from that you only have to read the title and you understand more than enough of that. But Albert Close tells us here that possibly the fall of the cities of the nations, also prefigured in verse 19, may refer to some future overthrow of all law and order. And isn't that what we are waiting for today over here in Europe? Aren't we all waiting for the big collapse suddenly and all of and finally, let's say, finally to happen? How far are they, and they, we mean the politicians, how far are they going with their agenda before the mob, the people from the street, will stand up and they, the organizers, will get the chaos they want, that out of chaos they can form their new order? We have the agenda of the refugees, of all the quote-unquote illegal immigrants, yeah, coming to Europe, coming to Germany, coming to Belgium, coming to Sweden, coming to Norway, coming to Italy, coming even to Turkey. Even Turkey has a big refugee problem and sends them further to Europe. We have the problem of negotiations for the last 30 years of Europe wants to be of Turkey wants to be a part of the European Union. Imagine that. Putting that Islamic State 100% with the full rights with all the other European countries, that will bring down the last part of quote-unquote richness that we have, wealth we have in these nations, to an end, if Turkey ever joins the EU unconditionally, as they speak about since years. How far more do they have to thrive it and drive it until you have a revolution in these countries in Europe, in the European Union? We are on the verge of that, if you ask me. That at least is my understanding of this. So it is already prefigured here that he says that it might refer to some future overthrow of all law and order in all the cities of Europe by anarchists. Well, we produce a lot of anarchists today, don't we? Yeah. Because we don't teach the Bible anymore in any school or whatever. So we actually raise anarchists. Anarchist is, I don't know how he uses in this term, but an anarchist is to be understood someone who doesn't like hierarchy. In that case, I am an anarchist, because I don't like hierarchy. I only appreciate the hierarchy that is laid upon me by Jesus Christ of the Bible, that he is the master and all we are brethren, brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, okay. But anarchist very often is also used in the term with violent people who don't accept any authority. Okay? And of course, when you are against hierarchy, you don't accept any authority above you. So anarchist is someone who fights against the authority, or let's say even the presumed authority, of the so-called leaders. A socialist, well, let's just put the word that he probably didn't have at that time, communist in that time. Yeah? Socialist, communist. So you have, for the United States of America, for example, you have the Democratic Party. In Germany, you have the Social Democratic Party. You have the Linke, the Left Party, which is the remainder of the Communist Party from Eastern Germany in that time. Those are all communists. All of Europe is communist by a long time already. People just haven't woken up to the communistic state they live in. And the revolutionary mobs. Now, all of a sudden, since a few months, we have over here in Europe the phenomenon of the people in the yellow vests. That is a movement that started in France. Of course, that is a controlled movement, that is controlled opposition of the yellow vests from France. They also already are in Belgium. They also already are in Germany. And this is so-called the people, yeah, the normal people going on the streets and demonstrating or fighting against authority of the leaders. So, as I said in the beginning, maybe we are right in Armageddon. Huh? Now, the term great city employed in verse 19 and elsewhere in these prophecies appears to have a double application. Okay, in some instances it refers to the city of Rome itself, and in others to the papal empire of Western Europe. I absolutely agree with the author here. When we speak of ancient Rome as Rome, we do not always mean the city merely, no, but the empire with its outlying provinces. This fact explains why at the fall and destruction of Babylon, as recorded in Revelation chapter 18, there will be a tremendous dislocation of trade, commerce, shipping, and social life. The destruction of the mere city of Rome would not have such an appalling effect on the outlying world. The destruction of papal Europe, with all her arts and applied sciences, would have just such an effect as here predicted. This is Revelation chapter 18. Now, interesting is, of course, when we read what the author says here, that we keep in mind that the Pope, who is the biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist, always wanted a seat in what city? Tel Aviv? No, Jerusalem, the quote-unquote holy city. Ever since he ordered the Mohammedans, or Muslims as we call them today, to get into Jerusalem for the Pope. They went there, but they kept it for themselves. Then he sent the Crusaders in the 11th, 12th, and 13th century, through 3 centuries, sending the Crusaders there to get Jerusalem back for the Pope. It didn't work out. It was always under control of the Ottoman Empire. Then came the destruction of the Ottoman Empire in the beginning of the 20th century. Then came the Guardian, let's say it like this, England over Palestine, and the quote-unquote returning of the Jews into their mainland, Israel, that was founded in 1948. But they didn't make Jerusalem their capital city. They made Tel Aviv their capital city because Jerusalem was parted into 2 or 3 parts. I'm not sure about that. I think at least 2 parts, a Muslim part and a Christian part, right? Or 3 parts, a Muslim part, a Christian part, and a Jewish part. So maybe that's 3 parts, I don't know. The point is, that's why Jerusalem could not become the capital city of Israel. Now, beginning of 2019, what does US President Donald Trump do, who is just a Jesuit puppet? He fulfills the next Jesuit agenda to put his embassy from Tel Aviv into Jerusalem, giving a sign to the outside world that he accepts Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he is Jesuit controlled. He is working for the Pope. When he accepts Jerusalem as the capital, then maybe other countries will follow, will put their embassies into Jerusalem instead of Tel Aviv, and by that also the nunciature of the Roman Catholic Church will also move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Yeah, Jörg.
And
that's
we know,
pretty interesting, isn't it?
And we know from 1993, the Oslo Accords, Bye Bye Gaza, the book from what's his name?
Barry Chamish.
Thank you very much. We know that the Pope already has the control over 60% of the old city of Jerusalem because Shimon Peres gave it to him on a silver platter in the Oslo Accords. So when the Pope is back in Jerusalem, when the quote-unquote Vicar of Christ sits back in the holy city here on earth, Jerusalem now, to me, is not a holy city because holy is only what God makes holy, and I don't think that God made that city holy anymore since he completely destroyed it through the Roman Empire in 70 AD. I don't think there's anything holy anymore, but that's me. I can be wrong. Maybe this is just a precursor of the Pope moving from Rome to Jerusalem. Now, when the Pope moves his Babylon from Rome to Jerusalem, what is Rome still worth, brothers? Not the dirt under your fingernails. And that goes for all the rest of Europe. So Europe can go down because the center of this world is then being moved from Rome to Jerusalem into the Near East. And then you will have the conflict from the Far East destroying everything that is left of the quote-unquote civilized world where we live in today. The Chinese will come through the United States of America, the Russians will come through Europe, the Chinese probably also, because they have many people, a billion and a half or something. They can be everywhere if they want to, and they will destroy all that what is called quote-unquote Christianity. And then we come to the fulfillment of Albert Pike's letter in 1871 that he wrote to Mazzini, when he said that the people will be so disillusioned with Christianity, they will all turn to Luciferianism. And David Spangler, didn't he say that nobody will enter the New World Order until they will have a pledge to Lucifer?
Yeah, that's right, Jörg. And you're reminding me of Revelation 17:6. You're familiar with that?
I don't have it in my mind right now.
And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire.
And for the 10 horns, maybe we could, instead of speaking of the 10 nations that pagan Rome fell into in 476 with the destruction of the pagan Roman Empire, we could maybe speak of the new agenda of the Antichrist, right, of the 10 regions or 10 kingdoms the Club of Rome formed in 1976, putting all the world into 10 different provinces, which they call kingdoms, and these kings are then going to destroy what? Old Rome, old Europe, to form a new world. I don't know. There's a lot of suggestion in there.
Speaking of New World Order, Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages. Yeah, that sounds about right, Jörg.
There's much speculation in there, let me assure you this. But the problem is, who will sit here and read Revelation chapter 16 and read this book from Albert Close, the divine program of the world's history, and make a full sense and full understanding of everything he reads here? I don't. So I leave many things also up to the imagination of the people and say, be a good watchman and watch out for things to come. And we are not to understand, for a very, very, very great part, the book of Revelation on beforehand. Many things are only to be understood afterwards, when you look back into history, and when we have historic facts and we can all of a sudden see, oh, look, God predicted this and this to happen, and this is the fulfillment in our earth today. And the problem we mainly have with that is that we have to use a certain kind of discernment to understand what is predicted to us spiritually, how that is forming materially in the material world that we are in. As I said earlier, the earthquake mentioned in Revelation chapter 16 is not an earthquake here on this earth, but an earthquake of the shaking of nations, the shaking of governments, like it has never been before. What does that mean? That means that all the governments of the world are trembling, are falling. And what is that? What Bret just said in Revelation chapter 17, verse 6? That these kings came against the whore. Isn't that trembling? Isn't that falling of nations and falling of governments? Could be analyzed that way, could be understood that way. Anyway, the author continues and says, chapter 17 and 18, the judgment of the Church of Rome and Papal Rome. It is a judgment, people. It is to come. It is the judgment of Jesus Christ, and it is to be executed in this world. It is to be a terrible judgment. Read it, dear reader, and see for yourself, and see how you can be on the right side of that judgment. And I tell you, the only side that you can stand on that is the right side, and that kind of judgment is when you are on the side of Jesus Christ, when you accept Him as your personal Savior, when you know Jesus Christ by reading and studying His Word, the Bible, the 1611 King James Authorized Version of the Bible, for English-speaking people today, that you will understand who Jesus Christ is, who the Antichrist is, and that you know which side to turn to when the ... hits the fan. Right?
Right. You got it.
1789, the author continues. French Revolution commences with the destruction of the Bastille. 1791. Icahn, the German, founder of the modern German school of rationalists, hire critics. Icahn's school produced the Unitarian and rationalist type of minister and theological professor, he who only knows God and the scriptures through the intellect. Okay? He who only knows God through his own intellect. What does the Bible say about that?
Watch out.
I mean, just when we go into the book of Romans, let's just go back here to the Bible index and go to the book of Romans, chapter 1, and verse 22. We read a verse that I just used a little bit earlier today. It says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You are wise when you rely on your intellect, aren't you? So I see this very much matching here. He who only knows God and the scriptures through the intellect. So you don't know God by his word. You don't know God at all through your own intellect. Because God only reveals himself to you through his word. And his word is the Bible. His word is Jesus Christ. And when you do not know God through Jesus Christ and the scriptures, but through the intellect, you don't know God.
Right. So then you can change his word and it won't matter.
Exactly.
And that's what's happened over and over and over.
Yeah.
It is quite subtle, isn't it, Jörg? It is quite subtle. And many will be deceived by the subtlety of this.
Mm.
I know I sure was for a long time. So why would I be any different than any other out there? Just going with the flow, just going with what your pastor, preacher tells you in the church. You know, you can do that for a while, but then start studying the Bible on your own. Doesn't matter what Bible it is, just start studying it. And once you realize there is a historical significance that is far greater than what's happening today. I mean, this is, the dumbing down of the whole kit and caboodle, It really, really makes one question, well, what happened? Why are we in this situation? Well, it's part of the plan. That's what we're studying right here.
Yeah.
The Unitarian and rationalist type of minister and theological professor. Yuck. We are right in the heart of it, aren't we?
Yeah. Men who only know God through their own intellect instead of reading and studying the Word of God himself. Now, Icahn revived the Jesuit Alcazar's preterist interpretation of Daniel and Revelation. Means that the Antichrist is already fulfilled and the latest in 467 AD. Other German professors elaborated Icahn's interpretation, and afterwards it spread to Britain and America, where it has become the favorite interpretation of nearly all our 20th century theological professors. Now in 1792, the decree of French National Assembly against the priests. 40,000 were exiled on the 26th of August 1792 AD. The Roman Catholic bishops and priests, because of their abominable lives, were amongst the first to suffer in the Great Revolution. The atheist revolutionary leaders justly held up to hatred and contempt the apostate and corrupt form of religion with which alone the French were familiar. With fanatical zeal they sought to overthrow all its power over the minds of the people. Now when we read this here, you have to understand that The atheist revolutionary leaders just held up to hatred and contempt the apostate and corrupt form of religion with which alone the French were familiar, because the French were only familiar with more or less the Roman Catholic leadership in their life, because they killed almost a good 100 years before all the Huguenots, remember? The revocation of the Edict of Nantes that happened in the end of the 17th century, a century before this, they threw off all Protestants. They killed 400,000 Huguenots, and they and 400,000 more Huguenots went out of France, fled from France, fled into Switzerland, Flanders, Netherlands, Germany, England, and via ships even to the New World. Yeah, like Tapasauci, for example, because he has ancestors that are Huguenots. Okay, so the French only were familiar with Roman Catholic leadership, and especially in the end of the 18th century, because we know in 1762 we have had this court case of La Valette, where the Jesuits were put into the position that they had to put out in the open their secret instructions, the Secreta Monita. At that moment, the French understood what the Roman Catholic Church actually stood for. All of a sudden, the mask of the Roman Catholic Church fell. And the French people saw that probably the Huguenots were right and the Roman Catholics were wrong, and they wanted to get rid of the Roman Catholics, and that culminated in the French Revolution. But instead of turning to Jesus Christ, oh my God, no, what did they do? They turned to themselves, they turned to atheism, and they turned to self-reliantless, and they turned to quote-unquote human rights, you know, the professing of the human right in the French Revolution, brotherhood and eternity,
fraternity, is it?
Yeah, fraternity, equality, blah, 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 all that stuff. Yeah. Nothing to do with the Bible. Instead of turning to God, turning away from the Roman Catholic Church and exposing the Roman Catholic Church as the devil that it is, and turning to Jesus Christ, no, they turned to themselves. And the atheistic revolution came, which was the French Revolution, which we are just talking about right here. Unjustly, but naturally, they visited on Christianity all the falsehoods, absurdities, immoralities, cruelties, massacres, and manifold wickedness and abominations of the corrupt Church of Rome. Écrasez l'infâme, crush the wretch, was their cry. The object was to bring about the utter rejection of all religion, meaning the only religion they knew, and which they thought was Christianity. Romanism, of course, is only the devil's counterfeit Christianity. Now, isn't this a very important little paragraph in this book? Oh my God, let's read it again. Unjustly is their atheist revolution, but naturally they visited on Christianity all the falsehood, means they interpreted Christianity with all the falsehoods, with all the absurdities, all the immoralities, all the cruelties, all the massacres in the past, and manifold wickednesses and abominations of the corrupt Church of Rome. Crush the wretch, was their cry. The object was to bring about the utter rejection of all religion, i.e., the only religion they knew, and which was thought was Christianity. This is in little, in the French Revolution, what Albert Pike in his letter to Mazzini wrote in 1871 will happen all over the world, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Romanism, of course, is only the devil's counterfeit Christianity. Mr. Hilaire Belloc, a Roman Catholic writer, says, quote, "It did not shock the French hierarchy that one of its apostolic members should be a witty atheist. That another should go hunting upon Corpus Christi nearly upset the Blessed Sacrament in his gallop, and forget that day it was when the accident occurred. The bishops found nothing remarkable in seeing a large proportion of their body to be loose livers, or in some of them openly presenting their friends to their mistresses, as might be done by any great lay noble around them. This is from Hilaire Belloc's book Taking French Revolution, page 226. In 1792 there happened a massacre in Paris. September 25th, 1792, and this massacre included 100 priests. And then we have the beginning of the era of modern foreign missions. This is Revelation chapter 14, verse 6. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. Sir Isaac Newton, who died in 1727 AD, pointed out that this vision of an angel flying through the midst of heaven, preaching the everlasting gospel to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, probably prefigured an approaching general preaching of the gospel in all the world. How true his conjecture has proved is demonstrated by the long list of missionary societies which followed after Newton's day. In 1792, the Baptist Missionary Society, founded by Carey, who went as a missionary to India. In 1793, we have the execution of the French King Louis XVI on the 21st of January in 1793. We have war in La Vendée. In March, the Noyades, drowning victims en masse. Legion of Merit, 18,000 perish in Nantes alone by the guillotine. The river Loire choked with corpses. 30,000 people died. We read this in Allison History of Europe, Volume 2, Chapter 12. The Reign of Terror starts in Paris in May 1793. Queen Marie Antoinette is beheaded in October 16, 1793. The worship of a harlot as the goddess of reason in Notre Dame Cathedral, 10th of November 1793. That is that Notre Dame that burned down a few months ago from after the publication of this video. The convention, the municipal sections of Paris, and the constitutional bishops and clergy accompanied this mocking procession to Notre Dame. This was meant as a burlesque of the processions with a host to this same cathedral, where the French people formerly went in procession and there worshipped it as God. In 1793, still the adoption of the new Republican infidel calendar on the 24th of November 1793. The massacre of St. Bartholomew acted on the stage in Paris. In this tragic farce, the Cardinal of Lorraine was represented in his official robes on the stage as the chief actor and instigator. This awful tragedy was reenacted for the purpose of inciting the mob to treat the French bishops and priests in the same manner as their forefathers treated the Huguenots. Termination of times and half a time, meaning 1,203 score years in Revelation chapter 12 verse 14. From the rise of papal power connected with the decree of the Roman Emperor Justinian on March AD 533, we read about that already in the last broadcast, to the Reign of Terror, the central year of the French Revolution, AD 1793 is, yeah, you guessed it, 1,203 score solar years. In 1795, the London Missionary Society was founded. The year after that, the Wesleyan Missionary Society was founded, and in 1798, Rome, the seat of the beast, plundered by the French. Pope dethroned by Bonaparte. You know this General Berthier history the SDA loves to teach all over the world. Rome seized by the French army. The Pope, removed from the Vatican and expelled from Rome, finds asylum in a convent in Tuscany. Spoliation of palaces, convents, and rich collections in Rome. The French soldiers burned the sacred robes of the Pope and his cardinals to obtain the gold with which they were adorned, and plundered and stripped the Vatican to its naked walls. Plundered and stripped the Vatican to its naked walls, that sounds to me like what you just read in Revelation chapter 18, was it?
Yeah, right. It does. Yeah, 17 verse 16, I believe, Jörg. Yeah.
17, 16, yeah.
Yeah.
Proclamation
That
of
does, actually. You're right. That is correct.
Yeah. Proclamation of a Roman Republic on the March 20th, 1798, preceded by enormous plunder of papal treasures in northern and central Italy. The retribution on papal Rome was foretold. We can read this in, you just mentioned it, brother, Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire.
Again, Jörg, that's incredible.
Yeah.
You didn't read this beforehand, did you?
No, I didn't know.
Okay.
When the French took possession of St. Peter's and the Vatican, they critically examined the so-called Chair of St. Peter, in which Roman Catholics had always been told the Apostle himself actually sat. Unfortunately, and this is something I read already in other places, unfortunately for the Roman Catholic legend, the French found on the back of this chair in Arabic the well-known sentence from the Mohammedan Quran, quote, "There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet." The chair had come from Mohammedan sources, and this telltale inscription had escaped the notice of the papal authorities until exposed by the French. We can read this in Lady Morgan's Italy, Volume 3, page 81. Cardinal Wiseman tried to dispute this, but as the Times remarked at the time, quote, "the lady had evidently the best of the argument." And we can also read of this in Hislop's Two Babylons. That's where I knew the story from. So the Pope, the Antichrist of this world, takes the chair of Peter in St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome, modern Babylon, and sits there for hundreds of years, claiming that this is the chair the Apostle Peter was in. And then you have an inscription that there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. Oh my God. This makes so much sense for apostolic succession. Right, brother?
Yeah, that's right. Apostolic succession. Yeah, what's that?
Yeah, the biggest joke of the centuries, if you ask me.
Yeah, pretty much. Spiritually speaking, you nailed it.
In 1799, the Church Missionary Society is founded. Now here we have again a few medals that you probably didn't have time to look up. We can look at Napoleon's unfulfilled prophecy in AD 1804, so we are starting in the 19th century and looking these medals up probably next time, because we have almost done 1 hour anyway. So this is a good moment to stop in 1799, and next time we're going to continue in 1804. And of course we will have a few comments by the people who are accompanying me today in this reading. Even though we haven't heard much of Michael, I think he was quite under the impression of what we spoke about here today. So I'm going to leave the microphone open now for my two brothers Michael and Bret to bring this broadcast to an end. Please.
Yeah, thank you for the reading. It just, well, there was so much confirmations of the things I was used to know. So it's just that it's going all the way down, and I have to check so much information, so many facts, so many years and so many dates. But despite of all the information, it's just the old story that whenever the papacy is in power, they just can only establish their power by sharing blood. And it's not their blood, but it's the blood of the true followers of Christ. And it's just the fact that every time I am listening to your sessions, or every time that I am reading a book concerning this subject, it's so disgusted that in our usual media, and especially our history teaching in the school systems, does not share any word of it. And as long as the people are being dumbed down and these facts are being played down by the Vatican so well, the people cannot imagine that the level of deceit is that huge. It's just the problem that you face when you're facing a real Roman Catholic who might be led astray by the system. And I think that this also included me, unless some years ago, that he cannot imagine that the level of deception is that high, that everything he believes in is quite the other way around. So if they speak of Jerusalem as the holy city, so-called holy city, just that you could quote Jesus Christ from Matthew chapter 24, verse 2, when Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall be not left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So when you're reading this verse, please tell me, does it make sense that you call a city called Jerusalem a holy city? When Jesus Christ in his gospel, when he left his word on this earth to his follower Matthew, said and promised that there will be not left not one stone upon another for the temple. So what makes it sense when God is not living in houses of stone, to have some cult objects, to have a so-called holy place? And everything, it just makes no sense. And the thing is that in my personal opinion, I think that Rome, the so-called New Babylon, will be sacrificed in the events of the installing of a complete new world religion.
Yeah, can I just say one sentence there, Michael? You are so right when you say this. And I just want to support what you just said with one sentence from the Bible. The Bible says, your house will be left unto you desolate. That's what Jesus Christ said. This is another interpretation of chapter 24 of Matthew. Yeah? You know, when he says that the destruction of the temple will come and that not one stone will be left upon another. He said, your house will be left unto you desolate. Yeah, I just wanted to...
Yep, meaning without God, correct?
Exactly, yeah, because God doesn't dwell in temples made of hands anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
And your house will be left unto you desolate, because you don't have a house anymore. You destroyed your house of God. And what's your house of God? Well, the temple that you have yourself. You destroyed your own temple when you didn't accept Jesus Christ as God coming on this earth, trying to come here to save people from their sin. Because that's what he came for, and they rejected him. Yeah, please, Michael, continue. I just wanted to throw this little sentence in because I thought that was a very important one from the Bible.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so, as I mentioned before, I think that Rome will be sacrificed and Rome will burst in flames. I don't know when, I don't know which thing it will cause in the end, but anyway, it's just another step to the installation of Jerusalem. And some of the first steps, as you mentioned before, was Donald Trump locating his seat of what's it called?
The embassy.
The embassy, yeah, correct. Yeah, thank you. The embassy to Jerusalem. And so, as we know of the importance of Jerusalem for not the Roman Catholic Church only, but also for the Muslims and for the Jews, it's just that it's the same thing all around. It's just Jerusalem now is the golden calf, yeah. And so you have a material item, you have a city, yeah, and you have a city now where you can tell where there's the Al-Aqsa mosque, and there is Golgotha, and there is this and that, and so you can also pray to wooden crosses and to hills and to to some fancy items and this stuff. It's the old way. It's the old thing when Aaron was waiting for Moses to receive the Ten Commandments, that the ordinary people needed something to praise. They needed something materialistic, and they get it every time. It's every time the same thing around, and now it's a complete city with items and with so many cultic designs and fancy stuff, and it's so much of wasted times and wasted words. It just let me finish my comment with the body of Christ is that we are the living body of Christ, and therefore I think it's maybe some of the best advices you can give to anyone is to have a clean spirit and not to let your spirit spoil from so many deceiving of propaganda, of lies, of not following God's order. And in the for the body of Christ, for my own body, with is I like to be in good shape. I like to be healthy. I like to eat the food that God ordained it, and this and that. And I won't do any tattoos. I won't do any jewelry on my body. And just that every time you don't need to speak to any people out there. For example, if you do not speak their language, it's hard anyway. But you do not have to speak unto people, you just have to observe people. And if you observe people who are tattooed with satanic stuff, for example, there are many people who are tattooed with the satanic stuff without knowing even it, or they are wearing satanic clothes, or clothes with skull and bones and some stuff. You can clearly tell them, you can clearly tell what kind of spirit they are following. And so I like to end it this way. It's just something very easy to follow the rules of Jesus Christ, because we are all sinners, but we got the operation manual, which is the Bible. And you can everything measure with the Bible, as the Bible as your measuring tool. And in any case, if you are off the line, and I'm frequently off the line, you can then adjust yourself and ask for guidance and ask for help. And you can be sure that there will be some answering either in this or in that way. And it's every time that I think that Jörg uses the sessions he does to confirm that everything can be judged by the Bible. And it's so wonderful to have him discovered that his thoughts are perfectly, most of the times, are perfectly confirmed by the readings and also by the Bible. And I think that's the great thing when we are getting older. We are losing our abilities in the physical area, but we are gaining abilities in the mental area, because we cannot see so good anymore. Therefore, we are not so concentrated on our eyes, but mostly concentrated on our minds. And I think that's the most precious gift we have. That's also an advantage you got when you're getting older. You're not so easily distracted anymore. And on this, I like to hand it over to Bret.
Yes, Michael, thank you. Very, very good comments there. And I fully support what you just said, and just want to add simply that it is a battle over influence that we're going through. We have the influence of Satan, which is quote unquote all powerful, which is really just BS. Really, if you were to ask me, it's a matter of this world. The world wants, things, simply put, Psalms chapter 2 says, "Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing?" You see it everywhere. Well, except those that are under the influence of the body of Christ. And that's what we're seeking out. That's what we're searching for. That's what we're studying. And that's what we encourage, very simply. And there is no doubtful disputation about it. Okay? God bless. We'll catch up with you next time. Bye-bye.
From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence even of your lusts that war in your members? Ye lust and have not, ye kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. Ye fight and war, yet ye have not because ye ask not. Ye ask and receive not because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it upon your lusts. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do ye think that the Scripture saith in vain, the Spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy? But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Be afflicted, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother, and judgeth his brother, speaketh evil of the law, and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judgest another? Go to now, ye that say today or tomorrow, we will go into such a city, and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor, that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire.